Well, welcome, everyone. Call to order the Planning Commission regular meeting, March 19th, 2026, beginning at 6:30 PM. I'll ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Baldwin,
Here.
Badrick,
Here.
Gardner,
Here.
Gaunt, yeah, Lachey,
Present.
Marino,
Here.
and Mans.
Here. In the packet and available here today was a copy of the agenda for tonight. Has everyone had a chance to review it? If there's any comments?
Mr. Chair, I move to amend the agenda.
Okay, on what grounds?
I don't think I need grounds, but if I get a second, I'll explain.
Okay.
I'll second. I would like to amend the agenda to remove item 5E for the following reasons. I think that it might have been a vehicle for the public shaming of CJ Badrick, and that's already occurred. And I think part two, so I don't think we need it. And part two is that the quote unquote learning opportunity is not necessary and not productive. I look at the 5 bullet points and the subpoints, and I believe that the commission members already have I would challenge anybody to say that we don't understand the ordinances, that we don't have sufficient training, we don't avail ourselves of sufficient training. And so I just think it is a dog and pony show that doesn't ultimately have a positive upside. So for that reason, I would ask that item 5E be removed from our agenda.
Does anyone have comments?
I second it, so I'm happy to provide some comments. So I agree. I don't like the substance of the item, and I don't think it's an appropriate matter for this body to be taking up. So under our ordinance, the commission exists and derives its authority from the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. And we exercise the powers granted under that, which is land use planning, zoning recommendations, and acting on applications that come before us. And this does not fall into any of those categories. And also, I think we all know this at planning. We're not an enforcement body. We're not an adjudicatory body. We don't have the authority to investigate, to make findings about, or otherwise address alleged violations by one of our own members. And under our ordinance, issues of removal or discipline are expressly reserved to the mayor. And as presented, I agree with CJ. This seems less like learning opportunity and more like asking this commission to sit in judgment of a fellow commissioner without any authority to actually take action. And I don't think that that's an appropriate role for us. And then he talked about the systemic issue. And I also kind of would zoom out even more that having a generalized discussion like this outside of the context of an actual application without findings and without a clear legal framework, all that does is that risks creating an informal record about how these regulations should be interpreted. And that can then be relied on by past applicants, by future applicants, or anyone who comes before us. So I just think we're starting really bad precedent here. And we have a lot of work in front of us, important work. And again, this feels less like a planning discussion and more like a public airing of a single commissioner situation. And I just don't think that's an appropriate use of those bodies. So for that, I hope that we can remove it. But to be fully transparent, if we don't, I will probably leave at that point in the meeting and not participate in the discussion.
Take any other comments before I speak?
I agree with what Mark and Austin said, pretty much verbatim.
Russ?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a planning commissioner, as a member of your Saugatuck City Council, the Saugatuck City Council reviewed in closed session all the information which was contained in this evening's packet. The only thing we didn't review was the memorandum from the city manager because that was prepared for this particular meeting. I support this motion to remove it from the agenda. The council deliberated on this at length and made our decision, which has been communicated to Chairman Mans. And I just want to correct Commissioner Marino. The city mayor does not have the sole authority to remove a commissioner. That is at the discretion of the city council with the approval of city council.
Anyone else? Because I feel that I do want to be able just to kind of address what's there and the rationale. As chair, I was told that we would possibly want to have a discussion about the potential perceptions of conflicts that could happen when events come before us and that we need to be aware of it. When the packet came out, I met with the city manager as well as the zoning director and said I was quite surprised that all of the details were there. Because I think we could have handled it in a way of kind of just reminding everybody of a higher standard that we are held to and really understanding the rules and how this could potentially make someone question, was there any favoritism? Was there any overlook of conflict? And it was not intended to have any type of a trial, because as Russ had already said, it had been presented in closed sessions with council, and there was a decision, kind of made. So that when it came out, it kind of immediately made me think this is like all of us to kind of sit there and again be judging. And that really wasn't the point of it. It was really good to have it as a discussion item at the end to kind of point out that there are things in here that could be raising questions. During the time that there was, questions as to whether or not there's an ADU, we had a member, that's making decisions on other ADUs, and they had members that were making decisions on whether you're going to revise the rules of the ADUs, which could have affected the approval of an ADU for the member. So there's potential conflicts, and it's been raised. I've heard it from the community, and I think Ryan and Grayson have. So therefore, it was to be able to have a discussion about that potential and making, just as a reminder, the way I kind of called it was like a reminder, not really a learning or planning, a reminder of the higher standards that we're kind of held to and how people are watching. No different than if we were talking about sign ordinances and you had a dozen signs in your lawn, it may be prudent to take the signs down before you're making suggestions about how many it would be. So that was the whole purpose of it. But it wasn't to kind of come in and be judgmental or to feel like we're putting anybody on trial. I think the way it was presented, because, in clarity, they thought that transparency, city staff, that they needed to have everything there so it could be very transparent. I think most of us would kind of, at least myself and when I'm saying everybody else was that probably was not necessary, but that we can't change, that part of it. So that's the only reason that was there. I'm not saying whether or not, have in favor or disfavor, but that was the rationale for why it was included, if that makes any difference to anyone.
And I think that's fair. But I think that reinforces probably the point that we're trying to make, is that what you just laid out there, those are concerns about commissioner conduct, disclosure expectations, broader governance questions, and those are policy and oversight matters and not land use matters. And I will, just for Commissioner Garner, I don't know if this, so section 31.34, any member may, after a public hearing, be removed by the mayor for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. So whether the public hearing involves city council, I don't know. I'll defer to the attorneys for that, but that was why I referenced the mayor earlier.
Mans?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Marino. Fortunately, we have not run into that situation, if ever, of having to take that action. So I do want to make a point, though, that I think Chairman Mans was speaking to this. This discussion should not be limited to the Planning Commission. This discussion should be the Historic District Commission, the Board of Appeals, the Zoning Board of Appeals, Board of Review, City Council. This is a discussion that we should all be having about whether we all understand what our roles and responsibilities are as either elected officials or appointed officials. And if there's an opportunity for training as suggesting here. So I have to, say Ryan, I think is going in the right direction on this, but I think this is more than just the Planning Commission that should be discussing this. And I think it's something that the City Council should take some responsibility for and say, we need to be making sure that we have this training for all of our elected officials. We just don't want to run into this situation. So I think there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, and again, I appreciate you guys giving me this opportunity, because you're kind of covering what I thought was important in the part of the agenda without it as being part of response to the motion that's on the table. But since I did make reference, and I do want to clarify on the record, when I made reference to things that have been voted on that could be questioned, everything that's been voted on regarding ADUs, whether it's the changes to the language of what an ADU is, or all those that have come before us, have been 100% unanimously approved by this commission. And so even if one person wasn't voting, it would have not changed those results. And so once again, those are all the things that were kind of looked at during the review that was done by, I'm sure, council in that in closed sessions also. But yes, there's nothing would have changed to where we are today. Any other comments? Go ahead, Doug.
My comment, not being an attorney, I am in agreement that this should be removed from the agenda. And the way that I thought about this was that it's not any different really than what's been articulated so far. But that if we want to engage in the spirit of learning and improving, and as I was thinking about my role as a commissioner going forward, because this has been like, wow, I really personally would like to understand, and I think we've talked about this now. I'd like to understand from council the role it believes it plays in demonstrating and enforcing the city's policy of ethical standards and conduct. Also, since it's not the responsibility of the Planning Commission or any of the other commissions or boards when there's a vacancy, the city advertises, the city accepts applications, and somebody in the city interviews. I assume it's more than one person. So what's the vetting process? And so I support this removal from the agenda. My question is, now does this go back to the council? What happens now?
No, I think my understanding is that, again, the decisions have all been made because it was, I don't really want to go into it, but obviously there's been no changes, on the commission. My understanding was that they just kind of wanted to have us, if we were going to leave it on the agenda, was to talk about where the questions could have come up and whether or not there's things that we need to look at, like, one of the questions was, when we're describing an ADU, does it need to, really clarify the difference between an ADU that's attached or not attached? Because we had several that came before us where they were attached and they were really ADUs. It was those type of things that was in the questioning that we really wanted to focus on. It wasn't every accounting of what happened in the detail and when somebody may or may not should have known and did know and what the rationale was. That's all been decided.
Well, unfortunately, I can't unsee this and I can't unknow this. So what is really troubling to me is that regardless of how this turns out, it's really just potentially quite damaging in terms of our reputation, not only in terms of the city council, but also the commission and perhaps other boards. And at a time that when trust in each other, our officials, the city, is probably more important than it ever has been, at least in my 80 years of living. So Russ, I don't know how council plans to address this, or if it just goes away now, we stop talking about it. But I just think that, it's just created, unfortunately, a lot of questions relative to how we manage our ethics policy and going forward. So, but I support.
And Bobby, and I'm going to say that we could do the support. The one thing that, again, I think the perception of how it was in there and maybe how they thought it was going to be approached was different. When we were kind of going through and talking about some of the different questions was to kind of just address those broader things as kind of just everybody giving an opinion on how we move forward. And if you have, any type of items that could potentially, and I didn't want to initially see it removed because I do think that it has been picked up. I mean, unfortunately, Commercial Record ran an article and I know we've got the Holland person on, and I don't want to be perceived that, oh, they took it off the agenda. And then it becomes a question of like, why was that? But again.
I think we've made it quite clear.
So.
CJ's want to say something. I want to say something else, but CJ, go for it.
No.
So I feel like I have to defend now, a little bit unfortunate. Sorry to be a distraction with all the good work we do. 2022, we came into the city with the planning administrator. We got a STR license. We signed it. We used it for the 3 years as we agreed to at that time. At the end of that, I replied, and after that, became a commissioner. I learned more about the rules. We had a lot of STR talk. At the end of my contract that I had, I updated it, got it up into sync. So again, apologize for the distractions. Look forward to moving forward.
Mr. Sheriff, I may additional comment. It's my understanding that of this body, you're the only one who has seen the legal opinion. I don't feel that I particularly need to see the legal opinion, but it appears to me from trying to connect dots that city council has decided to take no action, having seen the legal opinion. There's no evidence that they had it on their workshop this week or any future agendas. And so, you know, it really does smack to me of somebody's idea that to punt it to us for some kind of action, that I think, as AJ was saying, is just simply not appropriate for us. And, you know, I find that really unfortunate. So that's all.
Agree. Any other comments? Mr. Gardner?
To answer Commissioner Gaunt's question about the vetting process for candidates or applicants for roles on our commissions, they are interviewed by the city manager, or it could be the zoning director in the case of the planning commission, the chair of that individual commission, and applications have to be completed, including when that person is appointed, there's an actual attestation form they have to sign to say that they have no business with the city or any potential conflicts of interest. I believe we do not do background checks on folks. I don't think that's been part of our process to date. So I think the process has been pretty good. We had some violations of this in past administrations, but we've been on the mark on this for the past 4 to 5 years in terms of following the process. And I know Chairman Mans has been involved in those interviews as well. But the council, at least from my perspective, will not be taking this up again. We've already taken our action. We've made our decision. We've gotten our legal opinion. We've had our closed session discussion. And I thought we did a really good job keeping this respectfully discreet, as well as the respect that the commissioner, in this case, Badgerak, deserves for the process. I felt we did a pretty good job with that. And I can't speak to the reason why it's here like this, but I will say there's an opportunity again here to take this back to council to say, okay, how can we do better? Not just necessarily with this individual situation, but as a city.
Right.
To train people, to make sure that they understand they have a responsibility to report something, even if they think it's a minor issue from an ethical standpoint, to report it. It's better to say, I might have an issue, and have you find out that it's really not, as opposed to finding it after the fact. So I think this is an opportunity for improvement for the city, and that's incumbent on the council because we are the responsible party for the ethics policy as well as its enforcement with the city manager and the city staff.
Well said, and I think the one thing that was in one of those questions where it said is any specific training would be beneficial. My comment to that was going to be no. I think we have a great, well-trained, very knowledgeable commission. It's filled with commissioners from diverse parts of our community. Everyone comes together to make decisions that follow our ordinances that are best for the citizen, the applicant, as well as the city at large. And I think, so therefore I would have said no to that question had we gotten to it. Any other comments? If not, we have a motion and a second. I will ask then for a vote. What's that?
It's voice vote.
Oh, it's voice vote, okay. All those in favor of the removal, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, item 5B is removed from tonight's agenda. Any other changes to the agenda? And may I have a motion to approve the agenda as revised.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as revised.
Support?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The revised agenda is approved. In the packet was minutes from the January 15th, 2026 meeting. I was not present at that meeting, so those who were, does anyone have any comments in regards to that meeting? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Which now takes us to our first public comment session. This is public comments on our agenda as revised. So if you have comments, please come up to the podium or raise your hand online. When you begin, give us your name, your address, and let us know what agenda item you're making the comments or what your comments relate to, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. We have no one in the room. Do we have anyone online? Again, raise your hand if there's. Seeing none online, we will go ahead and close out the first public comments of the evening. Which takes us to new business. The first item of new business begins on page 7 in your packet. It's 640 Water Street. It's a public hearing on the PUD. So.
Chairman Mans?
let's-
Just a quick question. I want to make sure I understood. So the page 7 does not have the correct project name, I believe? Just more of a point.
Page 7 does not have what?
It says Wickwood Inn.
It says Wickwood. So just noted. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Spent a lot of time on this one, I missed that one. So I will open up the public hearing. And I will ask for the summary of what is in front of us to this evening from the zoning administrator.
So, excuse me, the applicant's back in front of the planning commission tonight. They're joining us online, as more of an administrative formality. The intent of holding the public hearing a second time is to allow for, the appropriate availability of the PUD ordinance in advance of the meeting as required by the zoning enabling act. For your note, some architectural changes have been made, after review by the Historic District Commission. None of the changes that are presented in the packet have impacted the approved deviations that were previously made. However, the applicant will need to provide a final site plan that includes, dimensional elevations and floor plans prior to the zoning permit being issued. And depending any suggested amendments to the proposed ordinance language, we would recommend that the commission hold the public hearing on the PUD ordinance and provide a positive recommendation to the city council, similar to last time, with the following conditions. Finalization of the easement agreement to the satisfaction of the city attorney, submission and approval of final floor plans by the zoning administrator, receive final approval from the Historic District Commission. All plans and associated documents shall be approved by all applicable city departments and officials prior to the issuance of any permits.
Thank you. Is the applicant online? And do they want to add anything? It's their opportunity for them to present.
I am online. Sorry, I'm under the weather, so I'm off video. I do not have anything else to add, no.
Very good. Thank you. We will open it now for public comments. If there's anyone in the room that would like to make a comment in regards to this application, please come forward. If there's anyone online, please raise your hands. Seeing no one in the room, seeing no one online, we will close out the public comment section, which means that we don't have any comments to generalize. So this opens up a commission deliberation. And Grayson, I think you already made reference. If we are looking at a potential motion, I think the motion would have to include the conditions that Grayson just laid out, that the site plan would have to be finalized administratively. The ordinance language, supplemental ordinance language, as well as the easement agreements would need to be signed in finalized. Is there anything else, Grayson, that I would have missed? Because the one thing that was missing regarding the site plans is the height, since the building was revised from when it was first with us. We do not have the actual heights. We can see that the roof lines did change.
I still support this. I like the new design. I like the previous one too. And to the point of should we do PUDs over 2 meetings, I think that's a good idea. Especially if we're talking about conditions and things that we need time to kind of stew over. So, but yes, I'm in favor of this.
I agree with Craig.
If not, do we
Chairman?
have?
Yeah, I just want to compliment Mr. Brown and his designer on the redesign that they've done after consultation with the Historic District Commission. I also appreciate the pictures that were included in the packet. I'm assuming those came from Mr. Brown and his architect, just kind of show the graphical representation of the new design with the other buildings around it, including the boats. Very interesting. So I'm assuming those were shown just to show the portholes that are on the building. It brings back good memories for me. My uncle sailed on several of these boats over the years, so it's just good memories for me. Thank you. And I appreciate the representation of our community and respect for the waterfront and kind of the designs we've seen in the past. So again, I think this can be a bit of a dramatic change for the neighborhood, just from a visibility standpoint. And this complies with the zoning ordinance, so I will be in support of it. That half story, I think, will make a big difference in terms of what people are going to see. So we've done our best efforts with our zoning changes for the waterfront, visibility, public access. So I think we've been able to get a pretty good project here and met most of the needs of the community. So
Very good, I agree. I think it looks, I really like the design, love it, with the changes. Do we have a motion?
Shall I read the motion?
Please.
Please.
I move to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance and the zoning map of the city of Saugatuck by approving a planned unit development overlay and associated plan for 640 Water Street as offered by staff.
Support.
Do we need the conditions listed or not? Because
Council
staff's
can-
already mentioned them.
Council can do the final conditions. It would helpful to have them see it, but it's not necessary.
We have a motion and a second then. I will ask the clerk to call roll for the vote.
Patrick,
yes.
Baldwin.
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Lache,
Yes.
Man, or sorry, Mayor now,
Yes.
and Mans.
Yes. It's been Jack, and congratulations, it's taken care of. That moves us on to agenda item under new business B, the 510-120 Mary Street, the Wickwood Inn, the public hearing for a conditional rezoning.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a point of order, please? To the, sorry, city manager still here? No?
I think he left.
Okay, you get it, Grayson, or city attorney. I'm looking at the ordinance regarding amendments to the zoning ordinance, and I'm unclear as to whether, it seems to me that there should be a multiple month process of where first it's introduced, and then the public hearing would be, and there would be discussion, and then there would be a public hearing at a subsequent meeting. It seems, and I can't find that that's here, but is it, in your collective opinion, appropriate for it to be introduced by a private party and then have a public hearing at the very first blush, first meeting?
I can answer that. Yes, there's no actual order that's laid out legally. It doesn't mean that you guys can't table it and discuss it again at a future meeting. It just makes sure that the public hearing has been held. And if you guys were comfortable with it as presented by the public, then it can move forward. But it doesn't require that you guys.
I don't see it either. I just wondered.
Yeah.
Usually when we do a zoning variance, excuse me, for example, the sign ordinance.
Yeah.
There was a lot of talking and a lot of meetings that went on before we actually had the public hearing. And so I just wondered, I just want to check. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, and I think that, because I was going to raise a question of similar when we get to the item C on the agenda, because it does appear that the two are so heavily related and they really do affect one another. I don't think it's appropriate for them to be in the same meeting. And I think you have discussions of both of them, but regardless, if we want to have the public meeting now, we can have a public meeting, and as Grayson said, we can always table it and move on to the next one, and we can ask questions, and maybe that gets tabled too, and then we can come back and have a discussion after both have been introduced and deliberation has happened. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Then we will open the public hearing for the request for rezoning for 510 Butler and 120 Mary. At this time, I'll ask the zoning administrator to give us a summary, and then we'll ask for a presentation by the applicant.
Yeah, absolutely. So this applicant was before you during your November Planning Commission meeting with a special land use request for the service of alcoholic beverages. And since then, that application has been withdrawn because the applicants kind of altered their approach on how they wish to proceed. They're now requesting the parcels associated with 510 Butler and 120 Mary be rezoned from the current zoning of R4 City Transitional Residential District to C2 Water Street East District. And until the rezoning in 2023 to City Center Transitional Residential District, 120 Mary was zoned Water Street East. The applicant's intent for the initial rezoning was to allow for short-term rental units on the first floor, but has since incorporated the parcel into the overall bed and breakfast establishment. In 2025, both parcels received conditional approval to incorporate the guest buildings with the bed and breakfast. This approval has not yet been finalized as the applicant has not completed the land combination and the parcels remain separate. This must be done prior to a final approval of rezoning. It's important to note that the consideration of the rezoning request is not a consideration of the use request, meaning if the rezoning were to be approved, the applicant would still be required to pursue a special land use to operate as their anticipated use rather than a bed and breakfast. If the rezoning request is approved, the use will remain a bed and breakfast as currently defined until permitted otherwise. With the proposed rezoning, the applicant has offered some voluntary conditions of approval, which would limit the property, not just the applicant's desired use. The conditions proposed include both land use and dimensional limitations, as well as operational characteristics of a specific development concept. The following of the proposed voluntary conditions are what staff would deem appropriate for rezoning, and those are limiting the lot coverage to 27%, maintaining the front yard setback consistent with the current R4 zoning district, and prohibiting the certain uses that were mentioned. These types of conditions are consistent with the intent of a conditional rezoning as they run with the land and help ensure compatibility with the surrounding properties. The remaining proposed conditions would be more appropriate as part of a future application such as a site plan review or the special land use. Those would include the service of breakfast, lunch, and dinner from an on-site restaurant, whether the restaurant is open to the general public, the ability to host on-site events such as retreats and weddings, operation of an accessory gift shop, and a maximum guest count of 125 persons. Based solely on the factors to consider for the rezoning, which are outlined in section 154, 176, staff would recommend the approval of the conditional rezoning request with the suggested changes.
Very good. At this time, we'll ask for the presentation of the applicant.
Great. Good evening, planning commissioners. For those I haven't met, which might be none of you, but my name is Chris Corey. I'm with McKenna, and I am happy to be back representing Wickwood Inn with a request. We are happy with the positive outcome of the previous time Wickwood was in front of you, looking to make alterations to their operation. And we are looking forward to continuing that move forward. I think we do now have a survey of the combined lots, and we'll be able to resolve that final issue on that end. Moving forward, Wickwood is looking to alter their operations again. They would like to be able to serve a full day of meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner from their on-site restaurant to the general public. They would also like to be able to host on-site events such as weddings or retreats, and they would like to be able to open their gift shop to the general public. Now, in order to do those things, they are going to have to alter their classification under the zoning ordinance. And the classification that would fit that operation is a motel or motor court. And I do want to make very clear that Wickwood is not intending to alter the physical design of their building or alter their operations in any ways other than the ones that I listed. So while that term is going to conjure a very different appearance architecturally, that is not really what the door that we are looking to have opened. We're looking to have a broader array of ancillary uses. This is when, as we understand, this is a multi-step process. And step one is this requested conditional rezoning. Now, the request is to move from R4 to the C2 Water Street East District. But we understand that there are elements of that C2 Water Street East District that the city, and frankly, on our end, we agree, would feel are not appropriate on that piece of property, which is why we have proposed this as a conditional rezoning and not a full rezoning. Proposed voluntary conditions that would dial back some of the aspects that are not appropriate within that northern Butler Street corridor where we're transitioning from the downtown area into a more residential character. And in fact, this piece of property is that transition point. That's the point we make in our materials. And I think it's actually a very important point here in that right now, Mary Street has your downtown zoning on one side and residential zoning on the other. It is a planning concept that streets are uniters, not dividers. And this is an opportunity to create a more stepped transition between downtown zoning to the less intense C2 district and then to residential. Mr. Moore went through the proposed voluntary conditions, but I will hit them again. There would be the voluntary giving up of the rights to certain land uses that are allowed in the C2 district. They're listed in our materials. Motion picture facilities, amusement and recreation services, and recreational transport rental facilities, and parking facilities as a principal use of land. Additionally, Wickwood would voluntarily give up the opportunity to have what the ordinance refers to as expanded outdoor dining, which means outdoor dining within the public right-of-way. That would not be permitted accessory to this use, even though in the C2 district generally it is. We have included in the conditional rezoning a cap on the number of attendees at events. Mr. Moore noted that that might be more appropriate as a special use condition. We're certainly interested in having that conversation. We will note that there is not currently a cap on the number of attendees in events in the C2 district. So that could be a special use condition, could be a voluntary condition. Either way, in order to have a cap, it's going to have to be in some sort of conditioned approval from this body. Additionally, the dimensional signage, et cetera, regulations of the R4 district would continue to apply to the site, with the slight exception of the lot coverage, which, as Mr. Moore noted, would be set at 27%. In the R4 district is generally 25%. In the C2 district is generally 65%. There is no desire on the part of Wickwood Inn to cover 65% of that lot. We find that to be inappropriate with the character of the surroundings. And so we agree on cutting that down substantially. The only issue is that the combined lots, 510 Butler and 120 Mary, once combined are 26.7%, I believe, lot coverage. So we would like to set that number above the existing lot coverage in order to avoid creating a nonconformity. But we are willing to bring it all the way down to basically what the site already has as far as lot coverage goes, rather than trying to make use of the 65% that would be allowed in the C2 district otherwise. With that, we are prepared to take your questions and discussion. As noted, there's a second piece or another application. They're not together, they are concurrent. And that is a one-word change to the zoning ordinance that we are requesting, but we will discuss that as the when that agenda item comes up.
Perfect. Before we move to public comment, ask if we have questions for the applicant, and I'm going to kick off with one of them. One, I concur, because I told Grayson this earlier today, that some of the things that you have in the conditional really apply to the special use that you would, if everything went forward, the special land use for a change of use to a motel/motor court, as far as like allowing outdoor dining, number of participants. But to your point of there's no caps within the Water Street East, I did bring this up and I want to clarify, while there may not be caps, 3 years ago, when the Wicks Bar and Grill was doing the expansion request for the cottage, there was a lot of pushback within the community about how many people they could host. And after approvals as well as legal involvement, they came to a conclusion that they can have 60 people outdoors and 30 people indoors. And there was a lot of limits on noise, time. This would all be something that would come up if we get to that point. But I want to know if you're aware that that did occur and that it was approval was subject to those type of limits, so that you're prepared that if it goes forward, and then you say, well, there's no limits in C2 or Water Street East. I want to be able to say, no, we have made them in the past and very likely could, because that is truly a commercial district like you're asking to be in. You're currently in a residential transitional, and you have, unlike her, you actually do have residential next to you. So that just, I want you to be aware of that. Since you said there was no cap restrictions in the C2 Water Street East.
We are certainly open to having that conversation at whatever time the Planning Commission feels is appropriate.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Grayson first. I'm unclear, if we were to grant this rezoning with conditions, why is a special land use permit required? Where's that come into the process?
I was gonna say, for the change of use, because they won't be a bed and breakfast anymore. That's their request. later down the line as they want to change their use. And that's also a special land use in.
So they're formally requesting to become a motel/motor court.
Yes, but the application right now
That's
in
not
front
in
of
front of
you
us yet.
is separate completely. This is just regarding the parcel land.
Okay, okay. So if they recategorize themselves, if we were to approve the recategorization, they still need a special land use permit.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look at the regulations for Water Street East, it has permitted uses and then it has uses approved by special land use.
Okay.
Both a bed and breakfast and a motel/motor court are listed as a requirement for a special land use application in front of the planning commission and approval. So even though they have an approval as a bed and breakfast, they would not be able to have a use change without doing another special land use.
I have a question for the petitioner, if I may. Since you want to be a motel/motor court, how do you get around the definition of motor court as being a grouping of single-story attached, semi-detached, or detached furnished rental units? Wickwood Inn is 2 full stories. Are you gonna knock a story off, or are you gonna come to us for a variance for an 8th appearance before us?
That is a reasonable question. We do find the rest of that definition to describe the operation at Wickwood Inn well, in that it is now a series of 3 buildings. I agree. 2 of them are multi-story buildings. There is no, as I understand it, desire to add any stories, and so we would see it as becoming a legal nonconformity. But that is a conversation we're willing to have. I mean, we're not willing to take your story off the building, but we are willing to talk about.
I was being facetious.
Well, we are willing to talk about the implications of various things. I listed out Wickwood's goals previously. Those are Wickwood's goals, and any other pathway through the zoning ordinance to achieve those goals is open for
If
our.
it doesn't quack like a duck or walk like a duck, I'm not sure it's a duck.
And the one thing that I brought up to Grayson earlier today, and will relate to you guys, it is somewhat confusing, and this is another example of why we need to kind of go through and do a complete ordinance and zoning review. If you look at our definitions, we have a definition for a motel, then we have a definition for a motor court, then we have a definition for a motel/motor court, and they're not consistent. Because underneath the motor court, it talks about a single story attached, whether it's semi-detached or fully attached. Underneath motel/motor court, it says a series of attached, semi-detached, or detached rental units. So in the motor court alone, it talks about it has to be single story. But in the motor court, motel/motor court, it doesn't address the single story. I mean, it's the inconsistencies that we kind of have, within the definitions, but the definitions are what they are. So I just want to point out that right now, at least Grayson was telling me that we have to follow the motor court or the motel/motor court distinction, because that's how it's listed as a permitted use. If it does go to Water Street East, if you look at our permitted uses, we don't have a permitted use for a motel. We have a permitted use for a motel/motor court.
And that terminology is old terminology
I
in
know.
a way.
Yeah.
So that's another reason to update the ordinances.
You mentioned goals, so I want to talk about goals real quick, because in a vacuum, I think this is great. And as you outline in your memorandum that, the contributions this is making to the community and the economy, I think it is great. But we do need to take a step back and look at it in context. And the context of this is over the past probably a year. I don't know, when did you start? A while ago. We started looking at accessory buildings. So we reviewed a series of requests. We were presented with a proposal for accessory guest buildings that emphasized no change in the physical character. And then in November, we received a request for alcohol service, which was described as being primarily for overnight guests. And then now, within a relatively short time frame, because your memo was dated January 3rd, 2026, we're being asked to consider a conditional rezoning that would allow classification as a motel and motor court, but that would open a restaurant and retail use to general public and host events such as weddings and retreats. So I'm trying to understand, this seems like a fundamental shift in what's been being, I guess, briefed to us over the past few months. So what really are the goals? Because it's hard not to think that your hand is not being fully shown, because we are having to look at each one of these requests almost in isolation to kind of see the impact of it on the character of the community. But when it keeps on being given to us piecemeal, I think that that's kind of doing a disservice to this whole, how it works.
I'm going to direct the internal operations questions to Martin Horner, who's with us tonight.
Martin Horner, one of the proprietors of the Wickwood Inn. Thank you for hearing what we're trying to say. As we bought the Wickwood 4 years ago, we were trying to figure out what we're trying to do. So it does maybe seem like that's what's happened. And originally when we had the Wickwood Inn, it was a bed and breakfast, and we bought the bungalow next door. So we expanded it. We added the outdoor spool. So the property has grown and changed. And it does lie on a very interesting press because you have commercial and you have residential. So we were kind of stuck in the middle. So we were trying to figure it out. I'll be very honest with you. That's what we were trying to do. And the more we've learned, the more we've looked at it, that is why we kind of come back and say we want to combine the pieces of property. The goal is not to open a full service restaurant. The goal is not to open a full service bar. The goal is to be able to offer our guests a opportunity to serve alcohol, also the opportunity to have a open to the community during shoulder season, like a high tea. That was something that we're looking at doing. So we're trying to look at different revenues during shoulder season. I sit on the CVB board here in Saugatuck and Douglas, and that was one of the committees I sit on, is the shoulder season, how to expand in the marketplace. I sit on the Wine and Food Festival board as well. So I'm learning as we're going through. And so it does seem, I hear what you're saying, and to myself, it seems confusing, but we're learning what we want to do and what we can do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So as to Austin's point, so this is the vision, what we're talking about tonight, and what's been presented, that is the vision? Or do you anticipate that there will be another iteration of the vision?
No, there's the other. And they talked about the retail opportunities. We're not opening up a retail store.
Right.
The concept is that we would have retail online, that people could be able to buy objects from the Wickwood,
Okay.
but not to have a store not open to the public. It would destroy what the Wickwood stands for. And it's a small home. You can't have people coming in the lobby. We have, 14 rooms, and it would totally destroy what we're trying to do, is that intimate, high level experience.
No, it's really a brand issue.
Then why are you talking about a gift shop?
So the gift shop is that we could sell items online. So it's not,
And you would need city approval to sell things online?
well, that's what we're,
As to be discussed, I think, one of the aspects of this entire discussion is the allowable ancillary uses to various types of lodging. Though, I think, given what Martin just said, we might be willing to add a condition to conditional approval stating that there will be no retail open to the general public on premises. Retail, I believe, if we were to be rezoned to C2, would, without some sort of condition addressing it, would become permitted use on site. Okay. Confirm that.
Real quick,
So
another,
we have to address it.
if I may, one other question. 100% of the people that I've talked to about this, when I say that you want the ability to host events up to 125 people, 100% people say, where are they going to park? That's a huge number of people that you want to have for a conference, wedding, event. And in my opinion, you're jamming it into a really small space in a really small crowded downtown. So I don't know if you want to address that, but you're asking for 125 capacity.
I think is removed, because that would only come up if they request a special land use for a motel / motor court. Because so that could be a condition of.
It's in their materials tonight.
Well, that's why Grace said up front, make certain, and we're making certain they understand that those conditions about the use are not subject to the rezoning.
Okay, my opinion on that is if we were to say yes and yes, they're going to come back and say, hey, you said yes and yes. So the only way that yes and yes become effective or become profitable or become real is if we do A, B, C, D down the road. So yes, I think it's an appropriate question, like where do you expect 125 people attending your events to park?
We understand that concern, and to be honest, the reason why we included the number of guests in the conditional rezoning understanding Grayson's concern that that is probably more of a special use discussion, and I understand why that is, but the reason we included it in the conditional zoning is in order to have this conversation now. And actually to address your exact concern, because if we put a
Please.
number in the conditional rezoning, before we even come in for a special use permit, there's already a cap. Right? If we, right now it's set at 125. If it's the planning commission gives us the indication that you know, a
Just trying to be
60,
just trying to be
90
consistent
or
with what
whatever
we've
is
done with
previously
elsewhere.
approved elsewhere is more reasonably appropriate, and that works for the internal operations, or there's a concern about parking and you want to push it down further, then it's gonna have to be a conversation. But if we put the number in the conditional rezoning, that's it. We can't kind of come back and say, oh, no, we want more, because it actually officially will have come from us. The limit is 60, the limit is 40, the limit's 125, wherever we set it. We're also willing to cross that section out and revisit this during the special use permit phase. But we're willing to have a conversation either way. And we do acknowledge that despite the lack of a limit written into the C2 district, it is all of us, I think, agree we need to have a limit. Because there is no reason to have an unlimited number of people at an event on that site. That would be, that would put a parking and other impacts on the downtown.
And to your credit, you put your cards on the table in that regard. I just find 125 shocking.
It will be excessive.
And while you're up there too, based on his question with parking, I'll just come out and ask, are there any plans to do something with the on-site parking? Because I'm trying to think of if you mentioned how you want to host on-site events such as retreats and weddings. And being familiar with this area and looking at an aerial view, there's only really one open spot where you could potentially put a tent or accommodate a big group like that. So what's the plan? Is there any plan for that?
Well, you're thinking about having an outdoor temporary facility like a tent, correct? If you were to use.
There's only one area you really could add a tent, and that's over on the bungalow side.
Okay.
Not putting a tent on the parking lot, nothing doing like that. There's really, and the tent, the mass they could hold is a 16 by 32 foot tent.
Okay.
So it's small.
And we certainly be open to discussions on, I think this would probably be a special use condition, but things like the parking lot cannot be used for outdoor events, has to be used for parking and other things of that nature. It cannot be reduced further in order to accommodate
So
an
the
event.
special land use, we would get into.
We can get
the
into
hours
that
that
kind
it
of
has.
detail,
Can you
yes.
have music? What about the noise? What about, any type of buffering? That's all part of the special land use if it was to build a type.
What's your timing of when you're looking to make this change in use?
Well, I think it's phased, correct? Yeah, I think that the alcohol aspect is probably primary. And actually one aspect that I guess I haven't said explicitly and I should is that a switch to C2 removes the special use permit requirement to serve alcohol, even absent all other changes. Even if there is no reclassification, even if there's no expansion of the restaurant to other meals or to the public or anything like that, once we get into C2, there is no longer a requirement to get a special use permit. All they need is a liquor license.
And
It allows you to serve alcohol, but it's because you're still underneath the bed and breakfast, you're still only allowed to serve it to your guests.
To the guests, yes.
and if you change the use, do you need to make any changes to your facilities like your rest or your kitchen or anything else? Or are basically is the building as it is ready to switch to this other use as soon as you get the approval?
We have an ADA compliant bathroom, and the health department comes in on a regular basis, and have been passing all the ordinances there.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I didn't quite hear what you said.
We already have an ADA bathroom that we currently have and we have a room as well. The kitchen has been upgraded and has been passing every inspection that we have.
I appreciate that. Thank you for repeating.
We do acknowledge that a special use process is going to come with a site plan process, which may trigger some required external improvements to come into compliance with the zoning ordinance.
Other questions for the applicant?
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight. It's not always easy sitting in front of some very skilled commissioners to ask questions, so thank you for being here. There's a lot of great comments this evening. I appreciate Commissioner Lachey's first question about this, as well as Commissioner Marino's comments as well. They're both attorneys, so they speak in a way that I don't. but I appreciate their being here and those skills. I speak more from a longtime community member, council member as well, and and again, what troubles me about this the most is that in my business, we call it kind of scope creep. It's starting to become something that it never has been. Things change, financial conditions change. I completely respect that and understand that. This neighborhood, this district, the transitional district is meant for transitional use. This seems to be moving into an area that is more, if you talk about the history and legacy of the Wickwood Inn, it originally was a private home owned by the Wicks family back in the day. Then became a senior, at the time, an old folks home, they called it, but it was meant for use of, and for that purpose, and then has been the inn now for a number of years. It's always been more of a passive, quiet place. This is moving into a space now, or a use that, again, we're gonna hit some of those same questions that Chairman Mann said with the special land use. You're gonna hear some of the same questions from, I believe, other property owners that are gonna raise some of the same concerns that we did with the cottage. And by the way, the owner of that building, I think, did a fantastic job working with the commission on some of those concerns and the community. So that provides a good roadmap for us on how to approach this. But what I'm struggling with, again, is this is moving into a type of use that is beyond what, that's why it's zoned as an R4. It's moving into a commercial use, which is already a commercial use, obviously, but it's moving into a more intensive commercial use, which it just begins to, that creep down the block. That's what probably concerns me the most. You know, the definition of the motel/motor court, you know, the actual zoning description of it is of interest, and the discrepancy in the zoning and zoning ordinance is also of interest. But I keep thinking about the Ship and Shore too.
I know.
Because the Ship and Shore is, was built back in the 60s, I think. I don't remember exactly when, but that, in my mind, has always struck me as a motor court. That seems to be the old style motor court kind of thing. But at a time, I believe the Ship and Shore did have a restaurant or open bar that the public could go in, and they still do now with the barge. So I start to think about, okay, how do we evolve from that to this, and so that's where I am on this. I mean, and to Commissioner Lachey's point earlier, I don't know that I'm comfortable making an immediate decision about this evening. There's a lot to consider here.
Well, if I could, right now, because we're in a public hearing, if we can ask if there's
Yeah,
any
yeah,
other things
thank you,
regarding
yeah.
the applicant,
So,
because
that was
after
more of a
after
statement.
the
I
applicant, we do
apologize.
public comments, then we do deliberation.
Yeah, I apologize. That
uh,
was more of a statement, gentlemen, so
yeah.
I apologize.
So if we could go back to, if there's no more questions for the applicant, I'll say thank you. We do appreciate it. I think everybody who is sitting here loves what you're doing. And we're just trying to figure out like how this works in, because it does fall within also a lot of other things we have going on, like the master plan, where we will be looking at land use and we'll be looking at our zones, and it's, you know, that's us looking at it holistically as a city. And this is because you're bringing one specific, you know, request to us. But if there's no others, we'll open it up for public comments. And if we have anyone in the room who would like to make a comment in regards to this application, please do so by coming up to the podium. Anybody online, please raise your hands. Or raise, you know, somehow come on the screen. We have no one in the room. I don't see any hands online, so that would actually close out the public comments with no comments being made, other than we did get one correspondence, which is inside of your packet, that stated from an individual that was in favor, who lives actually very near the Wickwood Inn, and it's, you know, it's in the packet in favor of the approval. Now we will move to commissioner deliberation. And I think a lot of us have already kind of expressed, you know, our thoughts.
Mr. Chair, two slight things. One, the correspondence in the packet was somebody who lives 2 blocks away. I'm not going to define how close near is.
It's true.
And apparently he gets some business from Wickwood Inn, so he might have a vested interest in being in favor of this. And secondly, when you mentioned that you believe everybody on this commission is in favor of what they're trying to do, I'm not sure that that's quite correct either at this point. I appreciate the spirit that you said it in, but I'm not sure that that's completely accurate.
I appreciate that very much, Mr. Lachey. I think what I was hopefully just kind of referring to, it wasn't making it part of the public record, but was that in the past, when they had made presentations, we all felt that it was favorable for what they were at that time doing on behalf of the community. There are definitely going to be questions as we move forward. So then regarding, and I go back and forth, if I'm deliberation, I'll actually will say that, Mary Street, as a property was originally in Water Street East. And at that time was considered a commercial part of it. And obviously it couldn't operate in Water Street East, but what their original intention was to rent it as a short-term rental because it had first floor. And so that's when the request came in to make it part of the R4. I think, when I think about where we may go with the master plan and our discussions that will happen regarding zoning, I have said for many years, as we've said on the commission and even as a chair, that I don't know why this city or other cities always draw zones based upon roads. And it's always one side of the road is one district and the other side of the road is the other. There are, like in the city of Chicago, so we have an alley system in the city of Chicago, and Russ probably knows this. They're all based upon the alley. It's the alley that splits the roads so that both sides of every street are in the same zone, or is in the same district. And, that's something I would think that we should actually probably look at here and when we start to look and if we're going to be making recommendations at some point to some of our mapping would be, is it appropriate that we actually use a road or should it be the second property in, those type of discussions. Because it just cases like this, you have commercial on one side and then you've got a transition on the other with a whole set of different rules. So the idea of it being R4 or Water Street East, the properties, they've kind of been both, when you look at the two properties. So I don't have an issue there. I think the next parts of it, changes to language for the motel motor courts. And then if they do decide to do a special land use, that doesn't open up a lot of additional discussion. So I'm open to other people's thoughts on just the zoning change that is being proposed.
With all the changes, I just see it as we're to compartmentalize it and just talk about the zoning with all these other things in the background is a difficult thing in the short time we've had to look at it, which I think is what's being discussed. And just my opinion I think their business is very pro-style. They present very well, but is the business, are we ready to expand that business to other areas? So that's to back up your comment of, we like what they do. We think they run a proper, strong business.
And I might be missing something, Chair, but we're talking about the streets. I know that he said uniters, not dividers. I quoted you right, hopefully. That was a good line. But like with what you were saying, where does that logic end? Because someone has to be the last spot before the transition. And so I don't have a solution for that, but it is, sometimes streets are the best thing we have because.
And a lot of cities do it. I have seen more and more cities that are making it to where their streets on both sides, this will be a discussion I will have, because when we move past the master plan, and we've talked about this in the past, when we were looking at our commercial zones, our residential zones, that there is a need that we need to go back and look at definitions, look at, all the things that are in our ordinance. And we discussed this a couple of meetings ago that we determined that would be best to happen either in conjunction or after the master plan is done, because in the master plan, we would look at future land use and we start discussing, where we envision the city. Then the next step would appear to be good to go back and look at our zones. This is only before us because, they have the right to actually make a request to us. We can table it until we actually do that review after the master plans. There's all those things could occur.
And that's my concern because, I shared this concern a lot when we were looking at the accessory buildings, because now we do have a home right next to Wickwood on Butler that is for sale. And then they may be here saying the same things that they were saying that, look at who's next door to me. Like, why can't I be in this zone? And then you move one house over and that even makes more sense because that's now a gallery / short-term rental. So now we have just taken away a whole block of a transition zone. So that is just something that I'm not saying it's wrong or what the right answer is, but just something need time to
Right,
think.
because down the road, we may decide that, hey, the commercial district should go all the way to Lucy.
Yeah.
But that's a discussion that we would have based upon our agenda, not somebody who's making a request of us. But it's hard to kind of separate it right now because we're so close to that part of the master planning.
So we, Chairman, so at this point, we can just simply table this. Can we table this to put it in conjunction? Because I understand exactly what Vice Chair Badrak is saying, is that we seem to be compartmentalizing this, and I look at this holistically. So this seems to be a pretty big decision for us to make as a planning commission, so I'd like to see this done in such a way that it's conjunction with some of the other things that we have to discuss. But again, I don't want to put any harm on the property owners either. I mean, that's the challenge here is, you know,
And Grayson, you can always speak in here, but the way I understood it is, you know, without the rezoning, then the request for language changes that there were, the next part of it wouldn't be necessary because a motel / motor court is
Right.
not
Okay.
available in the R4. And then if the request for the language change is not approved, then they may not want to move forward with the change of use request. So it's kind of, you know, so we can look at them all together, but literally you have to make one change to be able to move on to the next one, which is kind of why I was thinking it is you know, this is more of a complication because we can't discuss the change of use until the other two are technically taken care of, but yet we all know that's what's coming in the next few months, you know, if we move forward with these first two. And again, so that's where kind of, you know, we have to look at it from a comfort level of, all right, you know, if Whitwood would have come to us after they bought Mary Street and wanted to incorporate at that time, and they wanted to move the whole thing over to Water Street East, would we have had, you know, an issue? Of course, times changed and now we know differently, but, you know, it's kind of like, well, they now have two parcels that they want to combine at some point. They need to be in the same zone. So we had to make a decision as to which zone you put them in. And at the time, it was better to put them in R4 because of the short-term rental. Had they determined that it was going to become part of the inn, or at least the request, they might have said, hey, we want to have it all in Water Street East at that time. So I look at it and I say, what would we have said then that request would have been made?
They were the ones who came, Sue, if I may, they were the ones who came to the city and said, we want to rezone the Mary Street property. We didn't just say, oh, gosh, that would be a lovely thing to do for them.
That's true.
And the issue then would be the same issue now, is the potential encroachment of a commercial property on the properties that are on that rest of that block and the properties across the street on Butler. I wouldn't be surprised if I don't see that you guys buy the house that's for sale next to you on Butler. That wouldn't shock me. And then you make the adjacent building in your property not adjacent, and so you have two adjacent houses. That wouldn't shock me. And so I think the issues then are the issues now. Do we want to encroach further into our residential district with commercial properties? And when you have a property that has ancillary uses, event space, I mean, we're not talking about Ivy out on Blue Star. We're talking about right in downtown Saugatuck. You're talking about an event space that you want. I just think I think A, it sets a bad precedent. B, it's a slippery slope. And I think it will negatively impact, I'll tell you a really quick story. In Pleasant Ridge, the city I lived in before, they wanted to rezone my side of the street. I was next to a freeway was being built. And they wanted to rezone my side of the street to a commercial, put McDonald's in, for example. And the people across the street and the people in the next street over and all of those streets said, no, that will negatively impact our property values. So anytime that you add commercial areas into a residential district, there is going to be an impact on those residents. So I think what was asked then I think what could have been the impact then is what could be the impact now, or the considerations, let me put it that way.
I wish we could do the special land use first, because I think that's really the thing that's going to drive whether any of this is possible. I would expect we're going to have very robust conditions. that might not be acceptable to them. I don't know. But procedurally, I understand that that's not the way this works. So I would be okay with a zoning change, knowing that we may not reach agreement on the special land use, or we might not approve it, and then the use stays the same. There's a change in the zoning on the map, but there's not a change in the impact on the community until we give that further approval. So that's how I see it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I'm the same. When we moved it in 23 one way, it was to combine them both. They were then asking just to be in the other zone. I don't think I could see through that, but knowing all the future things, I think that's a bigger leap at this point in time.
And I think that in my opinion, is having a discussion at a future point about a change of use and all the potential conditions that we could place upon it is a worthwhile thing, and allowing them, and again, they have to come to us, we're not going to them and saying, let's do it. So allowing them to be able to bring something to us at a future time gives us that opportunity to kind of look at and say, okay, how does it impact the neighborhood? The same way we did within that commercial district of the Water Street East with the extension of the Wicks Bar into the cottage. And I think we'll have very similar type of reactions from a lot of people who live there. But to be able to get to that point and to give them that opportunity, we would need to make an approval of the zoning change. And so for that reason, I lean it to be favorable to the approval of the zoning change, knowing that we have the opportunity later to really address the change of use or what type of use would be permitted.
I'd be fine with that.
Other deliberation.
I just really hope that if we grant the rezoning, that not a single person on this commission, when we're considering a special land use, says, well, we've granted the rezoning, so we have to grant them a special land use permit. Because what was represented a few moments ago was, oh no, maybe we won't. So if it is part and parcel, then just be upfront and say, hey, we're gonna rezone it and we're gonna grant them some kind of special land use permit.
I don't think I'm not hearing that myself.
I don't
I'm
think that
hearing
has to
everyone
happen.
is
Yeah.
saying that to be able to have a discussion about the land use and whether it's appropriate would mean approving their request for a rezone.
I'm just putting it out
I
there.
know.
I'm
And I
just
think-
saying.
And I think that's what Grayson was trying to do up front, and I've been trying to make certain everybody is very aware, it's on the record, that any approval for a rezone does not give any approval for anything other than some of these dimensional conditions that they're willing to put into the rezone, as far as, like the not being able to expand beyond what was allowed in the R4, as far as the property and setbacks, lot coverages, that those conditions would go with the land in that new zone. So they couldn't come back and say, oh, Water Street East allows me to go out to the street, or Water Street East, it has to still follow those requirements that were in the original R4. So those conditions, I think, are standard. Everything else regarding the change of use is only if we get to the point of them coming to us with a special land use for a different type of operation other than a bed and breakfast.
Okay. I understand that perfectly, but I stick with what I said.
No, and trust me, it's been like an hour on the phone today, like making certain that is so clear, because I think there's a lot of issues regarding the.
Oh, I understand the letter of the law. I understand the letter of our ordinance, the explicit nature of our ordinance. I'm saying that members of this commission say, well, we did this, so necessarily we have to do that. And if that's the game we're playing, then I think people need to be upfront and say, that's the game we're playing.
Again, I don't want to get into all of my thoughts anyway on all the things that I see, the issues regarding the change of use, because we don't have that in front of us yet. But so it's, at least from my standpoint.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman Mance. Commissioner Marino, with a question to the applicants about the seeming, what's the word? Not really sure what direction they're moving with this property. I share that concern too. And again, I've got a little bit of business experience, and sometimes you're really not quite sure what direction you're moving, right? So where I'm going with this is that the commission, there may be the perception from the layman standpoint, from the man on the street saying, you seem to be accommodating zoning changes to meet a business person's needs as opposed to what's best for the community. And really what's going to be best for the community is the discussion with a special land use. So I agree with Commissioner Lachey. I don't think that this presupposes approval of the special land use.
Okay.
But I do think from the public standpoint, it could be perceived as though we asked for this change in 2023 and now you're coming back and asking it to be changed back. What's going on? Is this going to come back again as you kind of still continue to figure things out? So I just put that out there because
But, and one of the things that our ordinances do allow is for business owners and residents to make special requests to
Of
the planning
course,
commission,
of course.
request items for us to consider.
Mhm.
Um,
this is an unusual circumstance. I
very-
don't recall this happening.
Trust me, this is very unusual.
yeah.
I mean, it's,
So,
you know, all you have to do is look at the timeline that's here and say this is quite unusual. I'm sure that they have understood it too. So at the time we had, there's no deliberation. Does anyone want to make a motion? Of any time.
Well, it's just trying to think of options that, because again, it's just come to us, it's the first time, first presentation, lots of other background things. Do we want to, I hate to push back on them. Now they've come a few times and we push back, but this one may have a reason to push back.
They can come
They
they've
can come
already
another
come
time.
how many
Yeah,
times since
exactly.
2023?
I know.
They can come a dozen more times.
So I think that, I think it's a little quick. I don't know if it makes sense to table this, but I don't know what I'm telling them they have to come back with. That's why I hesitant to asking for something further other than a little bit of time. No, I'm not ready to make a motion.
So if we tabled it, it would be until the master plan's done.
That's
Um,
what I was gonna say, if we're not willing to look at the request for their request for a rezone until we have a time to look at it more holistically, then that would actually happen in conjunction with our review of the master plan and our zones thereafter. If we felt that there's no real risk to anything changing, may it be in the Water Street East C2 versus the transitional R4, then you can approve that change. And then, as we said, then if they decide to move forward, we can have discussions on whether or not we would allow a land use, because without a land use change or through a special, land use application, it still will continue to operate as the bed and breakfast with the 2 accessory buildings as it's been laid out currently. So, again, there's no harm in.
So there are no operational differences available to them just by changing the district, or are they able to do, they're able to do other things by making that move back?
The only thing I think, that Grayson, if legal, if you're online, let us know.
Yeah, I'm here.
If it goes to Water Street East, is that they would be able to apply for the liquor license, but it would be restricted to only service to those who are staying within the bed and breakfast at this time, unless they get a special land use to a different distinction.
Technically, if they're in the C2 Water Street East District, they can go through just a zoning permit process to become any of the permitted land uses in that district. And that would not come before you guys, only if they pursue the special land use. So they would be permitted to get just a zoning permit to be a retail store, a domestic business repair.
But to be a motel motor court.
Right, they'd have to come back for that.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah,
They
but
could
if
be
they
other
started
business.
properties, any of those things could come in.
So the things that we have listed in here as a permitted uses, retail store, domestic retail business, personal services, art gallery, or a single family dwelling, they could do without coming for us, but all the other ones would require them before us, even in the.
And then just to add to Grayson's point, because I know there's been quite a bit of discussion about the motel and motor court aspect of this, because that is what the applicant has indicated they might do in the future. The conditions they've offered with rezoning takes some of the special land uses that would be available in the Water Street East District off the table, but not all of them. And so in considering a rezoning request I mean, yes, a motel motor court is something that the planning commission should consider from a compatibility standpoint, but there's also other land uses like a hotel or an inn, a restaurant, I think business and professional offices. Those are also not foreclosed by the conditions that were offered with rezoning. And so when you're looking at what are the possible outcomes, if we grant this conditional rezoning, would all of these land uses be compatible with the surrounding district? That's something that should be considered as well.
If we were to take any action, I believe the action that is being requested is a lengthy conditional zoning reordinance, rezoning ordinance. And I, for one, am not, I mean, it's multiple pages with lots of conditions that I didn't come up with, and none on this commission came up with, and I don't think our staff came up with.
Well, to Commissioner Lachey's point about that, a conditional rezoning requires the applicant to voluntarily submit the conditions along with the rezoning. So, well, there was some consultation with city staff. The conditions, the planning commission can, speak to what it would maybe consider acceptable conditions, but this is actually not something that you could conditionally approve. The conditions have to be voluntarily offered by the applicant per the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act.
Thank you. What I was getting at was it's simply, if we were to make a motion and say simply rezone this back to move the whole thing to Water Street East, thank you. That's not what is in front of us. What's in front of us is a lengthy proposal to rezone with many conditions. So, and that's what the public hearing was on. And I would say, argue for one thing, that if we simply were going to do a clean rezoning, that might require another public hearing, because that's a substantial change to what with the public hearing was noticed. So I am, for one, not willing or ready to go through all of these conditions, the voluntary conditions that they proposed tonight, and say yes to that, no to that, yes to this, no to that. I've read this multiple times, and I just haven't been able to absorb all of them to figure it out. That's just me. But I don't want people to think on the commission that, yay, we could just rezone it and just adopt the motion as put before us, because it is a complicated motion.
And I agree with you, the thought of, at least with these exceptions, to let's have some table it and get some detail to what the applicant is bringing in front of us, so that we can take the time to each one of those. Is that?
Yeah, and as the city attorney just said, I mean, I know they exempted out domestic repair services, which I thought was very generous of them, as a non-allowable use, but I don't think they did offices. And we have a very strict rule about offices in our downtown, despite somebody who's not following that. But otherwise, we have a real strict rule about first floor office space on downtown, and we don't, as a policy, want that. So, I think there's a lot to consider here that more than just what's been presented to us. Do we need a motion to table, Mr. Chair? I move to table the request for the rezoning with the conditions, which were line item 5B, until an indefinite date in the future. I know I'm going to run foul of our city attorney with that one, but
I think it might be helpful to understand what else you need from the applicant, if there's additional information they need to submit, or if there's some kind of event in the future that is going to trigger the planning commission picking this back up.
well, to be honest, I hesitate to say wait till the master plan is done, because that's not going to happen tomorrow. But that does seem like a bright line deadline that's available to us.
And realistically, when are we targeting the master plan to be done?
Was that 6-9 months?
We're saying September,
At least 6 months, I would think.
at least the draft.
If we can get back to it.
Chairman's to Jake, our other option is to deny the rezoning request outright, correct?
Yes.
But then they can, but then I don't believe they can come back within the year unless we make changes after the master plan.
I'm not suggesting, I'm just saying that's other options on the table.
Right, because I think the idea was that if everybody had a chance to kind of look at all the conditions, and if they felt that, okay, one of the permitted uses is office, and it wasn't listed, then if we went forward, then you would have you would add that in as a condition that they would have to accept, that you, in addition to the other ones that have already said that they wouldn't do. So there's ways that we can still add it, but I know that if people don't feel they have the time, then we need to let them know what our issues are and ask that they address those, and they could come back in front of us next month when you would say, okay, we're tabled till next month. Is that good?
I just want to make it clear that for the rezoning, the commission cannot condition it. It has to be the voluntary conditions.
Oh, voluntary. Okay, so we can give you the indication
Suggest.
that you could come back with something like that. But I mean, is there other things that we?
I was using office as an example.
Well, no, I do agree, because actually, when you look at the permitted uses, that one still shows up that could be something that could be done if it was in Water Street East. You know, the other ones that were permitted, they kind of removed as an option for them at some, because it goes with the land. It's not just Wickwood and the current owner. It stays with the land if it is granted.
Chairman,
Go
Chairman
ahead.
Mans, thank you. Chairman
Sure.
Mans, just to make sure I understand the schedule. So the master plan update is going to be delivered in September. Is that what I'm hearing of this year?
The goal is September, well, at least have the final draft that we
Okay.
would then review for presentation to the public, and then, of course, it has to go to council.
So if that were the deadline that we would put on this tabling, that would give us the information we would need to have the applicants come back. And we'd have that all in front of us to be able to make a decision in conjunction with the intent of the master plan.
Right, because I think we'll all have to vote, of course, on these things,
Right.
but the idea, at least as the preliminary discussion with the master plan, was that once the master plan and the future land use was done,
Mhm.
because we have had the request, even by council's priority, to look at our zones, and should we consolidate zones, and do we need 28 zones when other cities have, fewer? And some of the things we were talking about here tonight. So in conjunction with maybe finalizing the master plan, you start to look at, and like we would start with the commercial zones, first, and kind of identify, are they appropriate today? So there's a possibility that we could end up holistically, proactively making recommendations for changes that would then go to public hearing and then go to council. Now, if that occurs, they could wait for those to happen, but that might be December, January, February of 27. Because realistically, how quickly could you all as a group come to a consensus that, oh, we're going to move this 3 blocks, we're going to change this. So from a timeline, of setting expectations that even though the master plan may give some indication, there still may be other things that would change that could affect them. But of course, if they had their rezoning, then even if we made changes down the road, they would be grandfathered in,
Mr. Chair.
I mean, like if we decided that, okay, C1 was going to be, further, or, transition zone started at a later point.
As part of your master plan, you'll typically do a future land use map, which
Exactly.
won't get so down in the details of each specific commercial, but you may have a better idea of where you want commercial in general. So it might not necessarily need to be pushed into next year, but just until you guys get a better idea of what your plan is.
Yeah, Chairman, where I'm going with this is that, businesses hate uncertainty, right? So if they can plan for what the commission is going to decide to do and when they're going to review this again, assuming this is tabled to that point, that there's some logic behind this approach, in my opinion, because it does tie into the larger issue that we're trying to deal with here of the creep, I call it, commercial creep. I know 4 or 5 months may seem like a long time, but it really will be quickly. But I think it's reasonable for the complexity of the situation.
I think that's fair.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was just actually, the phrase certainty, I thought was very powerful there. And I was actually thinking about that before you said it. I think in terms of how long this should be tabled, I don't think it would be fair or appropriate to table it for several months until the master plan is finalized. But I would suggest maybe giving the applicant an opportunity to refine the conditions and then to give you more certainty in what it would be their long-term goal and approach to this property. And if they could come back next month with some refined conditions after discussions with staff and the city attorney, maybe they would give you that level of certainty as well of what this is going to look like. Obviously this is not special land use process, but there could be some more refined conditions to give you the certainty about what this would look like when they propose their special land use. Other than that, I would suggest not tabling it for several months, because I think the master plan process is going to be a little bit fluid, and we have target dates for it to be finished, but we just can't guarantee when that will be adopted. And I think it'd be unfair to have the applicant tabled for that long. I'd actually advise them probably to just withdraw at that point and maybe resubmit at a later date. But I think if you were open to tabling it, maybe give us a chance to discuss the conditions with the applicant, make some refinements, and then to give everybody some certainty about what this may look like. Almost to the extent that you would have the details of a special land use permit without the plan in place. But they could say specifically, you get more specific on the events, give more specific, are they going to make any changes to the property? Are there going to be any physical improvements, outside of the buildings? I mean, these are all things that they could probably offer if they're open to doing that.
No, David, I appreciate your comments on that, because that's kind of, if we were tabling, I'd like to give them an opportunity to kind of hear what some of our concerns are, so that they have the opportunity of deciding, do they want to come back to us next month? So if we tabled the discussion to next month, it's up to them to determine, do they want to present Grayson with something for us? And then if they decide not to, then we can just remove it, next month in our meeting.
Thank you, David.
To the petitioner, if I may, one of the problems I'm still having is that you are attempting to make Wickwood into a motel motor court. And, you look at the definitions of motel and motor court, and it pictures parking spaces right in front of the units, individual doors that open, a Motel 6, or the one we have on Water Street. I wonder if you want to examine whether you might be actually fit closer into the definition of a hotel or inn. The only difference that you don't fit is that you don't have an internal hallway. But that's just something to think about, because I just keep having a problem envisioning, and I think the public would, you just don't have the parking that is directly accessible to the rooms, which is what a motel or motor court typically is thought of as. So,
Commissioner Lachey's, it was definitely a comment that came up yesterday when we had Jake on the phone, and they said, well, that is when they bring an application to us for the change. But because I feel the exact same way, I was like, I don't think this, just letting you know in advance that the definition that you're trying to go with motel motor court is probably going to be challenged, very difficult, here, because I think you hit a couple of points, in some of the things in the memo, but there's a lot of other things that go along with the motel motor court to where it doesn't line up, and we'd have to be given a lot of conditions. But that's as they told me yesterday, it's not for me to tell you which one, to come back with. It's for you to kind of decide what you think would be most appropriate for you, as well as what we might be able to approve.
and you could have a 2-story hotel.
Yeah, I'm just in answer to that. I do want to clarify, we would be looking for motel/motor court. That entire phrase, we understand that definition conflicts with the definitions of motel and motor court written separately, but without it having in front of me, and I'm willing to be corrected, I believe that in the C2 WSE district, it says motel/motor court. However, at this point in the process, what we're really trying to do is keep our options open.
Right.
And we are willing to, when we get to that phase of, are we looking to be reclassified as a different kind of lodging, we are definitely willing to talk about what the different options are and what fits best with everyone's goals. In the meantime, we are absolutely willing to make revisions to the conditions. We are willing to expand the list of uses that would not be allowable and make other changes that may make the Planning Commission more comfortable.
Yeah, because I kind of looked at it and I thought, when I looked at all of our definitions, I mean, again, we're jumping past, but since we are kind of having a holistic conversation here, that there really wasn't anyone that it really fits what you're trying to do. And then it became like, well, they could actually recommend a new use, but then that would require us to review the use, then to go back and change the ordinance for whatever zone you're in to include that as a permitted use with a special land, application, which would take even longer than, some of the other things that we're kind of looking at. But that's, if we can't find, a way to work with one of the other definitions that's currently allowable.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's similar to the exercise that we went through with staff, and we had 2 or 3 conversations with the applicant's team just to try to find a mechanism for them to propose what they wanted to do. So we did look at, with the applicant, the C1 CC district, Water Street East, as well as R4 CR, and we looked at the definition of hotel, inn, motor court, motel. And then even we thought of, should we even propose should the applicant look to propose an idea of a new land use category called like a boutique inn or something like that. So we looked at 3 different zoning districts. We looked at a couple different land use terms that had accommodation type uses, and ultimately we tried to find with the applicant, what would be the simplest way to be able to propose something, the cleanest way to be able to propose what they wanted to do. And ultimately, this was kind of sparked by a conversation, I think in November or December, when I think it might have been you, Mr. Lachey, who said, what is your 5th and 6th and 7th request going to be, and can we put it all together and get you? Was Austin, but it was what do you want to do, and let's get it all together and find a way for it to be processed. And so I think our challenge was with providing the applicant with some advice on how we could at least provide the mechanism for them to be able to make that request for their overall plan for this property. And so I think there's certainly multiple ways this could have been done, either inventing a new land use category or going a different route. But we thought just, motel motor court obviously didn't seem like the cleanest definition, but they could meet the definition, that combined definition that's in there. And we thought that, rather than adding a new use to R4, we felt that it was graduating beyond R4 transitional. It's going into something that is much more commercial district oriented. And then we felt that, well, we don't have a light commercial zoning district. So what, voluntary conditions would essentially limit the intensity of a Water Street East district. So it'd be its own kind of limited commercial. And so that's ultimately the conversations that we have with the applicants that I believe help them to, take this route. So I just want to give a little bit of background about the conversations that happened and why we went, why the applicant went this direction.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that helps as an understanding the rationale for asking for it to become Water Street East at this time with all the conditions, which it really kind of creates almost a separate, like I say, a light zone within Water Street East. But, I think the idea of them coming back with just those conditions, not putting any of the conditions that would relate to the special land use, remove them because we really don't need them unless you just want to kind of say, hey, we know that they may be more restrictive down the road, but we're going to throw these in. As long as they're aware that they can put them in there, but we still may ask for things more restrictive when you get down to if there is a special land use request.
I know that they obviously went through this a lot, and I think one of the big things we're dealing with is distinct requests, procedurally distinct things that are going on. But based on what David was saying, is there any other method that can consolidate this into one decision point? I don't know. I don't think so, but I know you mentioned something about amending R4, and I don't know if that gets us there, though.
I think the only way that could be achieved is if you guys wanted to amend the definition of a bed and breakfast.
Okay. I don't know if that's a worthwhile thing, because last time we went around and we looked at all the bed and breakfasts that could be affected by the amendment we passed or we proposed back in October, I don't think we saw that it could be an issue that could spiral out of control. So I personally wouldn't be against looking at that if it can get it all in one place, but I won't speak for anybody else.
Maybe one other option could be, and I didn't look into this too deeply, but it could be a rezoning to Water Street East with a PUD overlay. And if they went that route, you would have, their overall concept plan with conditions and specific use requirements. And I mean, that would be one way to do it all at once. You would have two agenda items. You'd probably have, and when we do this other communities, we do the base district rezoning, and then right after that, we do the PUD overlay and concept plan. And then I'd defer to Jacob on this, but sometimes we will do it so that those two ordinances are tie barred. So if the PUD doesn't pass, the Water Street East wouldn't pass, so that they're really would go together as a base district rezoning and PUD rezoning with the specifics of that plan. So that could be the option where you consider it all at once if the applicant was open to going that route.
I think this is another reason why, I mean, there are competing issues here, there are competing complexities here. I think we should do as David suggested a while ago and basically step back, delay this for a month, get this work done as David just articulated and Austin, you've articulated, and come back.
I'm on board with that.
I agree with that.
And I think we've had enough conversation here that David, each of us have given the applicant a lot of the ideas as to what they may consider coming back with. But I do personally like the idea of the PUD overlay.
Move to table for a month.
Second.
Is this a voice vote or a roll call for table?
It's
Roll call. I'll ask you to call the roll.
Yeah, second.
awesome. Patrick,
Yes.
Baldwin.
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Ghana,
Yes.
LaShay.
Yes.
Marino.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, commissioners.
A month.
We will,
Appreciate you being
uh,
here.
thank you. We will huddle with staff and come up with our next move.
Thank you.
So that moves us to item C, which is the public hearing on text amendment. Which in itself is a different thing, so we will go ahead with that. So with that, I will open up the public hearing for 510 Butler Street regarding the text amendment change for the definition of a motel motor court. At this time, I will ask the zoning administrator to give us a summary, and then we'll have a quick presentation by the applicant.
So as you alluded to, Steve, this is a separate application, and this proposed text amendment would relate specifically to the zoning ordinance and would affect all properties that would require a special land use for a motel / motor court in any zoning district. Currently, as a special land use, motels and motor courts permit amusements and sports facilities for the exclusive use of guests as an accessory use. And the applicant's proposing that be changed to permit amusements and sports facilities for the primary use of guests and its accessory use. The difference to be considered is how this text amendment will affect the intensity of the use. As the use must remain accessory to the primary use of the motel / motor court, the impact on the intensity is likely to be less concerning than if it was the primary use itself. And the commission should also independently review all 4 of the criteria that are listed in the review.
Presentation by the applicant.
Yeah, I'll be very brief, Mr. Chair. I believe this issue will be rolled into whatever our next step ends up being very quickly. We did have concerns about the idea of the word exclusive and the ability of both the city and frankly Wickwood management to guarantee that everyone is an overnight guest all the time at all of these facilities, as opposed to the word primary, which would allow a little more wiggle room without putting an enforcement burden on anyone. But with that, yes, we will likely roll this into whatever happens next. Thank you.
One comment for the applicant. When you are looking at this, I would suggest when you added in D, which is meetings and conference rooms, if you do go to the motel, motor court, or hotel inn, you want to go back and look at, I think it was 2021 or 2019, the Hotel Sagatuck, which is in the Lake District, but they've made a request to us to add a conference room as like a separate and detached unit. And it was a lot of discussion went in place, and their approval was contingent upon it being used by only registered guests. Now, there were some people who felt that it was why did it matter whether they were registered or not registered, if it's a moving space? But I just want you to be aware that we're trying to be consistent, and so I remembered that, and I was telling Grace, I said, that's what, I guess the benefit of being here for 5 or 6 years is that you kind of remember some of those old cases. So that might be something you might want to consider, addressing, because it previously did require the exclusive use only of guests that were registered at the property.
Yeah, that's good context. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
As this is still a public hearing, we'll open it up for public comments. If there's anyone in the room or online, seeing no one in the room, do I see any hands online? Not seeing any hands online, we'll close the public comments. We'll have commissioner deliberation on this proposed change to the language regarding a motel/motor court. I think I know where it's going to go, but let's open it up.
I think we should table it for a month.
Needed to make certain that we had filled the public hearing part of it.
Make a motion to table until the applicant comes back next month.
Second.
That will require a voice vote, not voice vote, a roll call vote.
Another roll call.
Yeah, a roll call. Exactly.
Patrick,
Yes.
Baldwin.
Yes.
Gardner,
Yes.
Vaughn,
Yes.
Lache,
Yes.
Mariner,
Yes.
and Mans.
Yes. Oh, and one other thing, if you're looking at it, if you do decide to go forward, you did address like the number of rooms that would be allowed because the one room per 1,000, so you can say you can do 24, you have 16. Do all the rooms at the Wickwood Inn, are they all 300 square feet or larger? Because that's one of the other requirements of a motel motor court. And that's in the, yeah, look at that, only because I was looking through all the ones that were listed. There's 4 of them. You addressed on number 3, but there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Number 1 was the minimum 300 square foot. So just give you a heads up if you do decide to come back with that approach. All right, that concludes item C, which is now been tabled, which moves us to the 2025 annual activity report. And that is in our packet, started on page 66. And Grace, if you just want to quickly walk us through that, I appreciate it. Right.
It might not weird.
And I believe this is a report that I presented to council.
Yeah, yep. So Steve's already gone over this with council, but I just wanted to provide some
Thank you.
stats for the year. Seems like code enforcement cases have gone up steadily over the past few years, and there's been some fluctuation in zoning permit activity, but it's relatively more busy than in 2024. And then there was a lot of work on the short-term rentals. I know that you guys put in a lot of time to that. I also included the most recent update that was approved by council. So you'll see that in there. There's no action required. I just wanted you guys to know that that was passed and so that you had it available to you. And then it included the memo with it too, that just kind of highlights the main things that were adjusted with that.
Great. Any questions on the report as he laid it out, or?
It's very helpful.
Looks like we're good.
Yeah, very well done.
The one thing that it kind of relates to this, Grayson, because, when we had in here, like the special land uses, non-short term and then the short-term rental ones. A lot of the short-term rental ones was the whole approval, special land use approvals for ADUs to be short-term rentals.
Yes.
What does the commission think? Right now, we don't have any applications currently for ADU to be approved, correct?
Yeah.
Because one of the things, if you recall, it seems like we've had consensus of this in the past, is that if we get to a time period where we don't have any applications outstanding, where we're not holding anybody's fee for filing a special land use, we made the changes to the ADU rules. We were talking about that we may want to consider removing the special land use requirement and letting it be administratively approved. Is that something we would like to embrace in the possible an April agenda?
Haven't we sort of just been working through a backlog of ADUs that needed to get this approval? And it runs with the land, right? It's permanent. So I I mean, I would be okay, I guess, it being administratively approved, but I like knowing that if there's ever one that was very particularly troublesome, that we could add some conditions. So that's,
Then we can, yeah, but we don't have to move, I'm just asking because we have situations that come up regarding it, and each time it comes before us, it seems like I hear over and over the comment of it meets all the standards, so it's basically kind of like a rubber stamp. Why do they have to come before us? Why do they have to pay that fee to come before us? But if we still think that we want to be able to see each one as opposed to letting it be administratively, then we don't need to put it as an agenda item.
Because even if they now build a new ADU that goes through all of the policies, then they still have to bring it to a special land use to then rent it. So it could be an approved ADU when it was built for a new build.
But if they want to have it, a short-term rental license,
Then they have to come
separate
to,
from
yes.
the full property, it requires a special land use approval that they can rent that separate from the full property.
My only concern is that we keep seemingly bringing things up to occupy our meeting time that keeps pushing back the master plan. And that's what we're supposed to be doing, is getting the master plan done. It's not I don't find it a particularly pleasant thing, but it's statutorily required, and now we have others who are waiting for us to do it. So to throw up an issue to occupy an hour, a couple hours of our time at the next month's meeting versus master plan, just a thought.
It was just thrown out because
I understand.
last 2 or 3 times that we had one, we said, why are we requiring people to do this? And so I was just.
No, I'm not objecting to you bringing it up. I'm just giving you my thought on whether we should do it right now or not. No more, no judgment on you bringing it up at all, sir.
Perfect. I don't hear any need for it, so we will leave it as they require to bring it before us. Which then concludes new business, so then we move on to old business, which is the master plan update. David, I know you've got a memo included in the packet on page, I believe it's 127. Is David still on the line?
I had an unstable internet connection there. Hopefully you can hear me.
Okay.
I think I was not running away from the master plan conversation. Is that where we are? I'm sorry, I was.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just saying that I was going to turn it over. We finished new business, and now the item on old business was master plan update beginning of 127 in our packet. You had provided a memo that we could read, but I thought you might want to walk us through and just kind of give us more detail on some of the things that you're working on behind the scenes, and hopefully with a timeline of when we may be able to see some draft or some direction of that.
Sure. Well, so this memo addresses really the first, well, I guess this is kind of the second phase of work, and a lot of this is behind the scenes. This is going to be an ongoing analysis of the public engagement. So that's both crunching the numbers from the survey as well as making some other observations from our open house meeting. And then the character analysis, I think, is going to be very valuable, this process. And as we were talking about the Wickwood before and talking about where we have transitions of uses and how residential relates to commercial, and I think the character analysis is really going to help to influence that future conversation with the future land use map. So the character analysis, we've talked about this before, but it's not just like an existing land use map, but we're going to look at the physical characteristics of block by block in the city. And we're going to look at the blocks. We're going to look at, are they walkable? We're going to look at land uses. We're going to look at, how buildings are oriented to the street or general design. And then that will really give us the foundation for that future land use mapping process. So I was really thinking about this as Mr. Chairman, you were making some comments before about how we're going to make these designations between commercial and transitional, residential and residential. So I hope to have some initial feedback on that, or maybe even a draft of the character analysis for next month, as well as demographic analysis and the base mapping effort. So what Grace and I, what we're doing is kind of a collaborative effort to handle these first 4 items here. the ongoing analysis, character analysis, demographic analysis, and the base mapping. And we hope to have a memo with the results of most of this next month. Then as we finalize this phase, then we would move into probably 3 or 4 meetings where we'd have specific topic area discussions, topic/chapter discussions. And then that will probably take us into the summer. After we have those conversations, we'll be preparing the draft for kind of our goal of end of the summer to have a reviewable draft, maybe have another open house with our results prior to folks leaving town for the season. So that's I think our general timeframe. We can tighten that up and provide you with a new proposed schedule and milestones at our next month's meeting as well.
That'd be great. When you do that block by block, does it break down, especially like in the transitional neighborhood, what all is in existence? I mean, we can drive by ourselves, but for the community, like just looking at that first block that we're talking about with Wickwood tonight, like, what all is in there? We've got, 1 bed and breakfast, you've got 1 gallery, you've got 4 homes, you've got 2 mixed use. For the transitional neighborhoods where we're especially looking at it, thinking, should it really be a transition? Should it be a commercial at some future point? I think that might be helpful. And I don't know if that was going to be part of your block by block analysis, but if we can get that kind of a breakdown, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, as we have each area identified, it wouldn't necessarily be an inventory of every single use, and it wouldn't be like a numbered inventory of what's in each block or character area. But I think when we have areas like these transitional blocks, we could identify those specifically and talk about the characteristics, talk about what's in them, and then how that would help influence our future land use map. So I think those transitional areas are probably going to be the most important for us to look at in terms of identifying those character areas and then determine what way they go, or if they're kind of the a new transitional zoning district, a light commercial, almost like we talked about before, or how we go on those. So
yeah, because I would kind of foresee that would definitely fit into the future plan of the future land use. If you looked and you said, oh, well, in that block, it's already 80% commercial use, and it's got 1 short-term rental or something, then it helps in kind of like looking at potential changes down the road.
Yeah, I think in those priority areas, it would probably lend itself more to having more of an inventory. But when we're looking at just like several blocks of single family residential, that would probably be a broader brush.
Yeah.
But
I wouldn't foresee it once we get to the edges of, it's almost like, where do you end the transition, or where does it become residential, those kind of things.
Exactly. Yep.
Good. Great. We'll look forward to seeing that in the, hopefully some things in April, and then we'll move it forward. I'm sure we'll see even more of it in our May meeting. Yep. Any questions for David from the rest of the council? Comments or suggestions?
Nope.
Seeing none, we will close the old business. There's 2 items of communication that was included in our kit. One we already made reference to from Ken Morris. The other one was just a correspondence for the record relating to approvals that we had previously on the 615 Park Street. And it's just asking us to make certain it was in the public record moving forward. What next moves us on to the report of officers, and the only one that we have down here is the Parking Improvements Task Force with Austin.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I have just 30 minutes of remarks, so we'll be good. All right, so no, it's obviously you parked close by, I'm sure, so it worked. We solved the parking issue, so it's been done. We have had 3 meetings thus far. Next one's April 7th. I wouldn't say we've gotten into anything substantive policy wise yet. Where we are at now is they did initial field work, which was just effectively identifying all the available, like a parking of kind of the greater downtown area, expanding up to the hill and just seeing where all the available parking is. There's still a little bit of refinement that they're going to do before our next meeting. And then the real movement's going to begin on May 2nd, which is when they're going to be doing their field work. And then they're going to do some field work in July. And that field work is going to be doing car counts, parking patterns, tracking turnover rate on Butler Street. And that's going to kind of inform where we move from there. Other than that, we've had general sharing of opinions, I would say, which is what could fix the problem. We've talked about, of course, options for busing people in, for having, transitory lots, increased interurban service, whether that's in Douglas off the highway or in Douglas, Old Hayworth site and Saugus off the highway. But it's just been general discussion. We've talked about how to deal with employees and all that. But again, we're not really moving substantively in one direction or the other. I will just flag that the packet for our next meeting was just released today, and that does have the survey results. So that was really the big thing that we had thus far, was another survey, which we did get a lot of, we did have a lot of participation. I think I haven't seen what's at now, but when we discussed it in February, it was already over 500 responses.
Great.
And a
That's
big
great.
thing, a big theme is people are against paid parking. So, but now welcome any questions.
Great.
Yeah, it just, there's been a data point that's been thrown out there about the number of public spaces in town. I've heard 1,500, I've heard 1,700. What is the number
So,
that they've initially identified?
so just in the downtown area,
That's what I'm trying to get some definition on. Is it just the downtown area? Does it include the west side of the river?
no, so the parking task force, we are only focused on the greater downtown area, not to the west side.
Okay, so what is that number?
So the downtown, everything is 711
Okay,
total on street and off street.
okay, because I've heard 1,500, I've heard 1,700.
So 1,500 is the total on-street parking for downtown, for the Hill, for the north residential
Okay.
area over near Park House, and then the south residential going down Lake
Okay.
Street.
Okay, so 711 downtown, and then that 1,500 number would include those other areas. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Parking? It closes out the agenda items, moves us down to public comment. On anything. We have no one in the room, and any of the participants online that would like to raise their hand to have any comment. Once again, you just kind of have to give us your name, your address, and you can have 3 minutes to speak on any item that you wish. Seeing no hands, we will close out the public comments, which takes us to the last item, which is commissioner comments. And I will just randomly go to Councilman Gardner and start at that end and work our way around if anyone has any comments.
Thank you, Chairman Mans. I just want to give you a personal note of thanks for pulling me back when I was making my statement to the applicants without asking a question. So thank you for your grace in doing that.
I thought we had another really good discussion about Wickwood. I think there's a lot of work to do, but I look forward to it. And I think it's great that we're being careful. So I'm glad, we've pushed it back, and I look forward to seeing where we can go with that.
I'll echo what Commissioner Baldwin said. I will just, I know we presented a couple options for looking at, the way ahead with Wickwood. And I would encourage just to take another look at our bed and breakfasts. And let's see if we have that right, because I was reading an article recently about how bed and breakfasts are kind of coming back, and they kind of went off and now they're emerging again. And maybe there is a different concept, and it is an antiquated ordinance, how we what we expect from bed and breakfast. And I think it has changed. So let's give it a good look and see if there is some areas for improvement there.
I have an impression, and it may be wrong, that our staff, and that includes our consultants and our attorney, enter into a situation and look to see how to make a business owner or prospective business owner fit into our community. And I, for one, believe that the staff should equally represent homeowners, all of our residents, and not try to make an overt effort to see how do we make this work. That is just a thought going forward. Similarly, I noticed in both of the new business items regarding Wickwood, there were several proposed suggested motions to approve, and neither provided a proposed motion to deny. That is a matter of perception. And, I just hope our staff recognizes that when you're talking to Wickwood, keep in mind that maybe one of the options that you need to let them know is that, no, this just simply won't fly at all. You're butting up against residential. You are trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. Rather than, oh gosh, how can we modify whatever you're trying to do and call you something that you're actually not? But it's close enough, so maybe we can jam it through. So I'm sitting here representing, I'm a full-time resident, and I'm sitting here representing, in my mind, business. I have many friends who own businesses in town, but I also represent people who are residents here, either part-time or full-time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Patrick. New week, new meeting for March Madness this week. So it's, I appreciate a good conversation, everything. I think we did the right thing with Wookwood. We gave them a little bit of direction and moved it along. So appreciate the good meeting, moving forward. Look forward to next month.
Thank you all.
In closing, I would go back to one of the things that I said earlier. I really do, and I think the city council and staff always says this, have the highest respect for everyone that comes to this table, the way they come prepared. And I think we always have good meetings. Everyone comes in, they're knowledgeable, they are prepared, they ask good questions. And I think that we gain something every time. And we have some different, different questions that come up and different of opinions. Regarding like the staff, I think I appreciate what you always try to bring forward. I do think that you have to represent both, but I think the purpose of the planning commission is that you try to present something as an option for a business owner to consider and for them to bring it to us and give us the opportunity of kind of either approving or denying it. And I don't want the city staff to really say, no, you can't do that. I think that's why we're here, is for them to bring it in front of us and let us kind of determine it. So I think it's just a matter of preparing the report and giving the options and letting that come forward. And I think that we have always looked at it in a fair way, and I'm sure we will going forward in trying to do what's best, not only for the business owners, but also for the citizens of the city. And so with that, I have nothing else to add other than to say thanks to all of you. Look forward to next month's meeting. And we'll call if there's a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Good job.